What's going on, everybody? In this one, we are ranking every NBA team's young core, and I did this entire thing in a three-part blog post on my Substack for free, so you can find the link down below to subscribe to that and check it out there if you want more in depth. Essentially, how it works is I'm just ranking 1 through 30. Each young core, the player has to be under 25 years old, so they can't be 25 as of like August 1st, whenever I guess July 26th. So without any further ado, let's get into it. And I got this idea from another YouTube video that I watched a couple weeks ago, and I thought it was interesting. So let's get into it. Tier 6, the worst young core, in my opinion, is the LA Clippers. So Clippers obviously are going all in the next 2 years with their veterans to try to win a championship. So obviously, Kawhi Leonard, Zubac, Bradley Beal, James Harden, not anywhere close to 25. The only guys they have under 25, Cam Christie, I guess, is the best, and then Patrick Baldwin, Kobe Sanders, who was a rookie, second-round pick. So they really have no one in their young core that is going to be in the rotation this year. My strongest guess for someone in the rotation would probably be Patrick Baldwin, big guy that can shoot threes. I always thought that he would have a role on a team in the NBA because he's like 6'11 and could shoot the three, but apparently not. Maybe this is the year. And then 29, trying to move through this quickly because there's 30 teams to get through. We got the Boston Celtics. You can see by the image here that it's not looking great for the young core here in Boston. 29, Baylor Shireman barely played last year. I want to say he was on a 2-year, makes the thumbnail here. So seemed like they're kind of tanking this upcoming year, but then going to go all back in next year when Tatum comes back. So they don't really have any young guys, and Anthony Simons, I think, barely missed the cut. I want to say he's like 26, maybe 25. So really, you're looking at Jordan Walsh, Josh Minot, who I didn't even remember they had, and then some like second-round picks from this year. Hugo, I think, actually was a mid-first-round pick, so that kind of upgrades their core. But again, not taking rookies super heavy into account in these young cores because we haven't seen them play an NBA game. I did watch a good amount of Summer League, though, so taking a little bit of rookies into consideration. Then we got the Milwaukee Bucks, again, from the thumbnail, you can see not great. Chris Livingston makes the thumbnail, who actually played really good in the Summer League and has a little bit of promise, but unlikely to be a starter on this team. And they are ranked 28th. They probably would have been a little higher. Well, they have 3 guys that are 25. So I wrote here Cole Anthony, Kevin Porter Jr., and AJ Green are all going to be in the rotation. Probably one of those guys at least is going to start next year, but they're 25, so they don't make the cut as the young core because you had to draw the deadline somewhere, and 25 was it. And then they also traded their best young piece, which was AJ Johnson, to get Kyle Kuzma. So really, it's like Chris Livingston and Andre Jackson, and then Ryan Rollins had a few moments last year as a rookie, so he's decent as well. So let's move on to the Knicks. Again, a team going all in on veterans. And I remember writing this, and at the time I was writing this, I didn't know that Miles McBride is actually 24. Seems like he's been in the league for a long time, but he makes the cut. He's probably their best young piece that qualifies for the young core. Then you got Ariel, I forget how to pronounce his last name, but he had some moments last year. I think he even played a little bit in the playoffs, a big center, so he could be decent. They do have Marjon Beauchamp now, who I always thought could be good, but he's been in the league so long and just hasn't done anything at all. And then Tyler Kolek. So guys actually in the rotation is probably going to be Miles McBride and maybe Ariel Hookporty there. I tried it. All right, now we're moving on to Tier 5. Tier 5, we're going to start with the LA Lakers. They get the bump up to Tier 5 from Tier 6, ranked 26 still, because I think they have a few guys that could be role players this year and have a bit of upside. Obviously, we got Bronny on the thumbnail. Dalton Connect was looking like a player that was going to be a nice young piece, but really struggled towards the end of last year. Was basically out of the rotation in the playoffs. And then they did get Jake LaRavia, which helps a little bit. I think he's a bit underrated as a signing. A athletic guy that could shoot the three, defend. He hustles and he has good size, so I think he could maybe crack the rotation. Then you have Bronny in there as really the third guy who showed a little bit at the end of last season and in summer league that he can play in the NBA. So he could be, a bench player potentially playing a little bit this year with a little upside. Then we got the Warriors at 25. We're looking at Podziemski here. They do have Jonathan Kuminga, but didn't really take him into account when I ranked him 25. And we're going to zoom out a little bit. I think this actually helps because I don't think he's going to be on the team at the start of the season. And honestly, I wrote this July 26th. By now, I thought he already would have been gone. So really, this young core on the Warriors, you're looking at Podziemski, Moses Moody, and I didn't realize this is coming into year 5 for Moses Moody. So he hasn't done much in the league yet, so I don't know how high his upside really is. Besides that, you got Guy Santos, Will Ricard, and then I guess you still have to kind of take Kuminga into account for this team. So then we got Chicago as 24, still in tier 5. We got Matas Buzelis, who a lot of people are extremely high on. I'm not as high on him as a lot of other people. He was pretty good as a rookie, but I wouldn't say sensational, pretty inconsistent. Had a decent summer league, I think, in year 2. There's so many other young guys that I would take over Buzelis, and he's really their only, promising young guy besides Josh Giddey, who, again, isn't on the team currently, I guess, because still a restricted free agent. So this kind of bumps him down a little bit. They may be a little higher if Giddey was confirmed to be on the team, but as of right now, it still isn't. So I had to take that into account a little bit. And then you have some guys that just turned 25 that aren't going to count for the young core, like Kobe White and Ayo Dosunmu. But they have a decent amount of guys. I actually like this guy, Noah Essenye, that they drafted. Some people think either Julian Phillips or Dalen Terry or Patrick Williams or Isaac Okoro could be a long-term solution as kind of a 3-and-D player, but so far I haven't seen anything that really shows any of those guys are going to make it. And then we got the Sacramento Kings, so I have them slightly ahead of the Bulls, and I'm actually kind of breaking my own rule here by putting a lot of stock into rookies because I really like Nick Clifford. And ESPN actually had him ranked as the number 1 rookie in the class so far following Summer League, which was crazy. He had an insane Summer League and then did struggle in the championship game, but before that was averaging like 19 points and like 7 rebounds and shooting over 50% from 3 in 4 games, if I'm not mistaken. And then I also like the other guy that they got, Maxime Reynaud, who I always thought the Kings needed this. I'm actually a Kings fan. I thought they should put Sabonis at power forward and get a center actually block shots and defend the paint. I think it would make him a much better defensive team. And then he can also shoot the 3, and he's 7'1". So honestly, I would like to see him start. I would like to see the Kings kind of blow it up and trade DeRozan and LaVine and kind of run with this young team plus Sabonis. I think they could be kind of dangerous with some of these guys. You still got Keegan Murray and Reynaud, and then Clifford, Devin Carter as well. Run with those guys and Keon Ellis and keep Malik Monk around. I think they would be a lot better team moving forward if they went that direction, but still they get 23rd for me, mostly because of those rookies and Keegan Murray. Then we got the Brooklyn Nets, similar situation with Cam Thomas, who still hasn't signed with the team, but they just have so many young players that are unproven. Like, some of these guys have to be good, and we just don't know it yet. So for that reason, I bumped them up to 22 ahead of the Kings and Bulls, which probably they aren't if you just look at this list of players, especially if you take out Cam Thomas. But, guys like Noah Clowney, Killian Hayes, I actually like Drew Timme, and I'm kind of surprised he hasn't been given a full contract. But they just have so many guys. If you look at this list, I want to say it's like 12 guys. So some of these guys won't even make the roster. probably, but I like them. Okay, moving on to 21, we got the Denver Nuggets, and obviously the Nuggets are one of these teams that are veteran heavy, that are competing for the championship. Again, they just won it three years ago now, I guess, but we still have Christian Braun and Peyton Watson and Julian Strother. So those three guys, I don't know if any of them really are going to be a star, but Peyton Watson kind of reminds me of Jaden McDaniels. Christian Braun honestly kind of reminds me of like Bradley Beal, young Bradley Beal, because he's athletic, have a similar like shooting form. Both can shoot the three, and I think Brown defends a little better but doesn't score as well. And then you got Julian Strother, who's just like a lightning bolt kind of player off the bench who could come in and hit three threes in 6-7 minutes and jumpstart your team, which we actually saw him do that in the playoffs a couple times. So with those three guys, I kind of like it. And then De'Ron Holmes actually isn't a rookie, but he tore his Achilles before he even played last year, and he had a really good summer league. So those three guys plus De'Ron Holmes get some 21. Then we got the Pacers, who you may think have a really good young core because they're a relatively young team that made it to the NBA Finals, but they're not as young as you may think, especially because with the rules of having the young core, you got to be under 25, and Halliburton's 25, and Nembhard and Aaron Naismith are all 25. So if you add those three guys in to the young core, they'd be a lot higher than 20. But really what you're looking at, the guy on the screenshot, you got Benedict Mathurin, Ben Shepherd, Isaiah Jackson, who might be their starting center this year, Johnny Furphy, who people think could take a jump, Jarris Walker, Cam Jones, who was drafted this year. So I think one of Furphy, Jones, Walker could be surprising this year. And then I think Mathurin's going to take a big jump with Halliburton out, and he should be starting again like he was 2 years ago. Decent young core for not including Halliburton, Nembhard, or Naismith. And that was the end of part 1, so let's get into part 2. And part 2 is tiers 4 and 3. So starting off tier 4, we have the New Orleans Pelicans. So for the Pelicans, a tier above those teams we just covered, because they got some guys that are already solid, at least role players, and some high upside guys, because they had 2 early picks, I think picks 7 and 13. So the rookies do bump them up with Derek Queen and Jeremiah Fears, who I think Fears has all-star potential, and Queen, a lot of people don't like him, but I actually kind of like him more than most people. So they get 19 here, and they do have a lot of guys, as I noted, that are 25 to 26. So like Zion falls into that, Jordan Poole, Trey Murphy, Herb Jones, those guys are all either 25 or 26. So really looking at Yves Missy, Jordan Hawkins, and then the 2 picks. So that combination of those 4 players, I think, makes them the best team on the list so far. Then we got the Miami Heat at 18. So again, Tyler Hero just turned 25. So you're looking at Khalil Ware, who apparently they're extremely high on. Jaime Jaquez, who had a really bad second season, I believe, last year. Maybe it was his 3rd season. And then you got Nikola Jovic Kasparis, who they drafted this year. So really it's being carried by Khalil Ware, who so far there hasn't been, a really great player on the list for teams 30 through 19. Khalil Ware could be, one of the best players we have on the list so far. So for that reason, really only, and possibly a bounce back from Jaquez. And Jovic already looks like he could be a decent stretch for. They get the 18 spot, still in tier 4. Then we move to the Cleveland Cavaliers. They are stuck in tier 4 here. Definitely the best player we've talked about so far is going to be Evan Mobley, an all-star. Besides Evan Mobley, there's just no one on this young core. It's Mobley, Jalen Tyson, Tyrese Proctor, who I think was a 2nd-round pick. Niang, I don't even know who that is, and then Imani Bates. So really, it's just Evan Mobley is the only guy that's going to play next year for them. So he just carries the entire team here to 17. It's possible you could put him higher just because Mobley is one of the best players in the NBA, 24 or younger, but just as a whole, this core is really bad. So I had to put him at 17. and right outside of tier 3. As we move in to this next tier of tier 3, we get to the Phoenix Suns, who last year would not have been this high, but they added a bunch of young guys this season as they got rid of Beal and Durant, and I would guess they're still adding young guys, but you can't keep Devin Booker around forever, who's already 28, I believe, if these young guys are just so raw that they can't win any games. I don't know how they're going to keep Booker there. And they've already started going super young. So you got Jalen Green, who is still really young. I want to say he's like 22. And then Ryan Dunn looked pretty good last year for them as a defensive guy. Didn't really do much on offense and didn't really shoot the ball well. So I don't know how good of a piece he is. But then they drafted a center pretty high in this guy from Duke, and they also traded for Mark Williams. So adding those guys to Jalen Green for this young core looks pretty good. And then they do have Kobe Brea, another rookie, and you got Iguodala, who played a bit for them last year, looked okay as well. Next team's going to be the Memphis Grizzlies. They are led by Zach Edey, and I did mention they would be a lot higher. But you're looking at Ja Morant and Triple J just turning 25 now, so they're not going to count on the list. They would have been much higher than 15 if you count Morant and Jaren Jackson, but as of this year, you can't for a list like this. So you're looking at Jalen Wells, who was really good as a rookie and projects to be a starter on this team. And then Zach Edey, who projects to be another starter, and Santi Aldama, who probably is going to start to begin the season with Triple J out. So right now, 3 of these players on the list are going to start early in the season. So that's pretty good to get 3 starters. And then you also have some promising guys like Scottie Pippen Jr., and they drafted Cedric Howard pretty high. And they also still have Gigi Jackson, who I could see breaking out because they did trade Desmond Bane. If they do need some more offensive pop, especially early in the year with Triple J out, Gigi Jackson could definitely break out. So maybe they are ranked too low still at 15, even though Morant and Triple J don't count. But then you got some teams here moving forward that have pretty crazy young cores and a ton of guys with potential, especially with these next 2 teams that I'm looking at here. They're basically ranked this high because of potential. So Wizards, I think Alex Sarr has the most upside on the Wizards right now. But then you got Bub Carrington, who I think has upside as well. And then they drafted Trey Johnson, who wasn't my favorite in college because he's kind of like a set shooter. Doesn't get his shot for himself as much as I'd like. But I do like Cam Whitmore, who kind of reminds me of just like a Cam Thomas player, maybe because they have the same first name, but kind of like high volume scorers that aren't really ever going to be like all-stars, but they're going to be great scorers in the league. Those guys are in a really weird situation where they can score the ball super effectively, but that's like the only thing that they could do really well. Then you got Koulibaly, who people are higher on than me, but I think he's a nice piece as well. And then you basically got a ton of young and unproven guys as well. Like you got AJ Johnson, Keyshawn George, Keyshawn Gilbert, a bunch of just unproven guys basically on this team that I think have a lot of potential. So then we got the Jazz, kind of a similar situation, and they've traded a lot of their guys like Clarkson and Sexton. So hopefully they move Lauri Markkanen because I want to see what some of these guys can do, especially like Filipowski because he had an insane summer league. But then they have Collier, who was really good last year, probably going to start for them at point guard. Kessler is probably going to start at center. Keontae George, I would think, starts at shooting guard. And then you got Ace Bailey probably starting at small forward, who I like as well. Walter Clayton, who was great in the NCAA tournament, potentially could be better than Keontae George. You never know. Taylor Hendricks, who was good before he broke his leg. Sensabaugh, who's a great shooter. Cody Williams, who I think it's too early to give up on him. He had a good summer league. KJ Martin, insanely athletic. He's stuck around in the league, has showed some flashes, so I still like him. And then we're moving on to Dallas, and I believe this is the last of Tier 3 we have with Dallas. So, yeah, Cooper Flagg is the main part of this young core. And Dallas I think they're going all in for a championship. I can kind of see it happening if they get healthy. because they're great defensively, and then you add Kyrie in there with Anthony Davis and Cooper Flag, and now you have some offense to go with that defense. So I think that Cooper Flag, you got to count him in this young core. Even though he hasn't played a game in the NBA, you got to count him heavily because I think he's going to average like 20 points per game as a rookie, especially in the beginning of the year when they're not going to have Kyrie. I think he's going to get off to an extremely hot start. So you got Cooper Flag, Derek Lively, who I really like. A lot of people liked him a lot as a rookie and then had a rough second year. He's actually hurt too. Jaden Hardy, he's kind of like in the Cam Thomas, Cam Whitmore situation in my eyes. Kai Jones was surprising when he came back to the NBA. Max Christie was really good when he came over in the trade from the Lakers. So they do have some other guys besides just Flag in there as well. Okay, now we got another team in Tier 3, Toronto Raptors, who, and this could be a little low. Some people are a lot higher on the Raptors young core that's carried by Scotty Barnes, especially because I thought guys like RJ Barrett and Emmanuel Quickley were going to count young core, but they're like 25 and 26. Maybe they're like 26 and 27, actually. So for some reason, I thought these guys were younger, but they didn't count. So it's really Scotty Barnes and Grady Dick as far as guys who really played last year. I guess Jacoby Walter played a little last year, and Shed, who are decent players. And besides that, a lot of unproven guys, but Scotty Barnes could definitely be an all-star if Toronto is in the playoff picture around all-star time, which I think is possible in the East because there's going to be a lot of teams with bad records. And a team with Quickly, RJ Barrett, Scotty Barnes, those three as a trio look pretty good actually in the East this year. So okay, we got another one in Tier 3. Portland Trailblazers are similar to Washington and Utah in my eyes because they have a lot of young guys that haven't broken out really into stars, but you could see some of these guys potentially being stars. And we saw that definitely last year with Denny Advia, who's still under 25. I feel like he's been in the league forever. He's still under 25. Scoot Henderson definitely, I think, has some star potential. Same with Shaden Sharp. So these guys a little above Washington, Utah, because I think Sharp and Advia especially are more proven than really anyone on Utah and Washington's roster. And I think these guys have better chance of being stars. But in addition to those guys, you also have Donovan Clingan, who was pretty good last year, is probably going to start. And you got Yang Hansen, who had a good summer league. They drafted him really high. Caleb Love, who I actually kind of like. He went undrafted, but I was smashing his overs in summer league for sports betting, and he was crushing. And then you got like Chris Murray, Ryan Rupert, who possibly could turn into 3-and-D players. All right, and finally we're getting into the last part here, the top 9 teams, starting with Tier 2. Atlanta Hawks get the 9 spot. A lot of people extremely high on the Hawks. The young core is actually looking pretty good too. In addition to their veterans like Trae Young and Kristaps are, I would say, definitely their 2 best players. They're veterans, but besides that, most of these guys count as the young core, like Jalen Johnson, who might have been an all-star last year, but he got hurt. He was averaging like 19 and 10, and the Hawks actually had a pretty good record before he got hurt. I think a really good young player. Then Dyson Daniels really showed he could be one of the best defenders in the league, but also was a playmaker. Risa Shea, number 1 pick last year, was pretty good. Okongwu kind of broke out last year. He's probably going to be their starting center. So they have a lot of guys here that are going to play. Like these first 4 guys, I'm not going to say all of them are going to start because Trae Young and Kristaps have 2 starting spots locked in, but probably 3 of these 4 guys in the young core are going to start. And then 1 is going to be like the first or second guy off the bench. Then they got Asa Newell, who a lot of people liked in the draft. He slid down a bit, and they got kind of a steal, I think, there. All right, then we move on to Philadelphia, and this is kind of where these young cores start getting pretty crazy. I guess maybe after Philadelphia, but they're still in Tier 2 here. Tyrese Maxey, I think, is underrated. Had 2 really great years back-to-back. 26 points and 6 assists in both of the last 2 seasons, which is pretty crazy. And he was only an all-star, I believe, in 1 of those years. Then they have Jared McCain, who was definitely going to be the Rookie of the Year last year if he didn't get hurt. And then they have Edgecombe, that one insane game in Summer League. I think he only played 2 or 3 games. But people are really high on him. So just with those three guys, it's already looking like a really good young core. And then you got Janai Broom, and if they ever give up on Embiid, they'd probably give up on Paul George pretty soon after. They got a lot of young big guys as well, like Barlow, Bona, and Watford. So maybe one of those guys can turn into a starting center if they ever give up on Embiid. So I think a really good young core. Then you get Charlotte Hornets. This is where it starts getting crazy. You got LaMelo Ball, who is a great young player. Maybe not as good as Tyrese Maxey, but the combination of LaMelo Ball and Brandon Miller, who I think is really good as well, potentially could be an all-star this year. He was averaging like 21, 22 points per game last year before getting hurt. I think those numbers are going to go up with him and LaMelo as the young core. It's looking really good, but outside of that, I had to keep them down at 7 and out of tier 1 because besides those two guys, I'm not too excited about, Diabate, Josh Green, Kalkbrenner, maybe decent. I'm not too excited about Knuppel compared to a lot of people. Trey Mann, I think, could be like a good 6, 7, 8 man. McNeely. So outside of LaMelo and Brandon Miller, not super excited about their young core, but those two guys are good enough to get them 7 here. And then we come down. I guess we're still in tier 2, so tier 1's coming up soon, which gets really crazy. But yeah, the end of tier 2 here, as you saw, tier 1 at the bottom. Amen Thompson leads this young core. I think he has the potential to be insane on both ends. Last year we saw it, especially defensively. He just couldn't shoot. If he ever gets a jump shot, he's going to be so much better. He'll go from like 15 points a game to around 20, and then he'll definitely be an all-star. But people forget that Sengun was an all-star last year. I kind of expect a slight dip from Sengun because they just brought in Kevin Durant here, who's going to score a lot more. Sengun might not score as much, especially if Thompson is better offensively. So I'm a little down on Sengun compared to last year when he was an all-star, but with Amen Thompson and Sengun right there, that's a really good young core. You already have one all-star, a guy that looks like he's on his way to being an all-star and is already like one of the best wing defenders in the entire NBA. And then you got Reed Shepherd that has some potential. You got Jabari Smith and Tari Eason, who looks like one of those guys is probably going to start. Now let's get into tier 1. We got insane tiers here. And number 5 is led by Anthony Edwards. Minnesota would be higher because just this time a year ago, the Wolves went to the Western Conference Finals behind Anthony Edwards, and people were talking about him potentially being the best player in the entire league after that. If you don't remember that, they definitely were. I think he's still top 10 in that conversation. Maybe not top 5 right now, but I think definitely top 10. If we're talking top 5 real quick, you got Giannis, Jokic, Luka, SGA, and Jason Tatum. I think those 5 guys definitely are ahead of Anthony Edwards. Maybe that's controversial. So I think Edwards is like 6, 7, 8 around there. I'm sure I'm forgetting some guys. Maybe you think Curry's still better or you think LeBron's still better. But I had to put him at 5, but in tier 1 just because of Anthony Edwards essentially. Then they got Jaden McDaniels, who is a really good wing player, but I don't think like all-star caliber. Besides that, you've got Dillingham, no one who's really played, Leonard Miller, Bones Highland, so they're not super young, actually, outside of Anthony Edwards and McDaniels as far as good young players. And 4, we got OKC. Honestly, when I was writing this, I thought SGA was closer to 25, but he's already 27. He had those unmemorable years on the Clippers, so he doesn't count, but outside of SGA, they still have a lot of really good young players. They got Jalen Williams, who was an all-star last year. Chet Holmgren possibly will be an all-star this year. One of the best shot blockers in the league, can shoot the 3. Probably going to be in for another massive year. Probably an all-star. I would think they have 3 all-stars, and it's those 3 guys this year. Then you got Cason Wallace, who was a great player, sometimes started in the playoffs. Great wing defender, can score a little bit, shoot the ball. So with those 3 guys, they look pretty good. But outside of those 3, really, I couldn't put them up in the top 3 because outside of Jalen Williams, Chet Holmgren, and Cason Wallace, no one in this young core really was in their rotation. Jalen Williams really only played when either Holmgren or Hartenstein were hurt. Then you got Nikola Topic, who didn't play at all last year for injury. AJ Mitchell was not in the rotation. Usman Jiang. So there's really only 3 guys you can count for this young core right now that actually play minutes for him. So moving on to number 3, we got Orlando Magic. Number 3 on this list as far as young core talent. Obviously, this team hasn't done anything yet. I think this could be the year. In a weaker Eastern Conference, they got better with Desmond Bane. I think they're at least going to win 1 series. Hopefully they win 2 series, maybe even more. They need to be healthy as well. Banchero wasn't healthy. Wagner at points wasn't healthy. Jalen Suggs missed a ton of time. So if they're healthy, this is a great young core. You got Banchero, Wagner, and Suggs. Now they drafted Jace Richardson. Anthony Black was really good off the bench as a defender and playmaker. So with those guys, and then hopefully one of Da Silva, Caleb Houston, or Jet Howard can turn into something, or Jace Richardson, one of those guys can turn into a shooter for this team. And then you got Desmond Bane, who's 27, so it doesn't count. But just with Banchero and Wagner, 2 of the best players on the list so far, and they're both on the same team. They're probably top 5 guys, I would say, under 24, and they're both on the same team. So those guys at number 3 for the Magic, I like that. Then we get number 2, Detroit Pistons, which is crazy because a year ago you would not have said this, but they had a great season, and Cade Cunningham took a massive jump. So you got Cade, who carries this team, and for me, honestly, I would take Cade over guys like Banchero and Wagner right now. And then when you start talking about Cade versus Anthony Edwards, I actually think it gets pretty close, especially if Cade has another year where he takes his game to an even higher level. I think we could potentially be talking about Cade maybe even over Anthony Edwards, which is kind of crazy. And I actually said in the first paragraph that I think he's the 3rd best player under 25 after Wemby and Ant. But this is the reason why Detroit is so high, because of Cade. And then you also have a ton of other promising guys. You have a really high-quality starting center in Jalen Duren, who's under 25. You have Jaden Ivey, who missed a ton of time last year, but looked really good his first couple years in the league. And a lot of people think if he played in the playoffs, they could have beat New York, and then they would have went to the Eastern Conference Finals. And then we're talking about Detroit as, one of the best young teams here, already proven, not just potential. Then you have Ron Holland, who showed some stuff. You got Ausar Thompson, who I don't think is good as Amen, but they play very similarly, and he could turn into a really good player as well. And honestly, I think I wrote it here somewhere. Their entire starting lineup could be under 25 next year. Yeah, if they bring Tobias Harris off the bench, which they probably won't, they could run out a lineup of Cade at point guard, Jaden Ivey, Ron Holland at shooting guard, Thompson at power forward, and Duren. That would be an entire lineup under 25, and a team that expects to easily make the playoffs and win at least 1 round, maybe 2 or 3 playoff series with a team full of guys under 25, which would be absolutely insane. So now we go to number 1. Probably spoiled it by saying Wemby when we were talking about Detroit, but that's the San Antonio Spurs. So even without De'Aaron Fox counting, who's probably their 2nd best player right now, Wemby had an insane season last year. He averaged over 24 points a game. I think led the league in blocks, was close to leading in rebounds. I think had 4 assists per game, I want to say 2. I don't know his stats off the top of my head, but already definitely a top 10 player in the league. I think people are going to talk about him in the top 5, if not top 3 this year. If San Antonio makes it in the playoffs and win a series, he's definitely going to be talked about as one of the best players in the entire league. If it was just Wemby, they wouldn't be in the number 1 spot, but they have so many other guys. They have Stephon Castle, who won Rookie of the year after Wemby won it, and then they just drafted Dylan Harper 2nd overall, who could instantly be a really good scorer in the league. And then in addition to that, they have Devin Vassell, who's still under 25, a guy who averaged 18 points per game a couple years ago and can shoot the ball. So I think 3 of the 4 guys we talked about in Wemby, Castle, Harper, and Vassell are going to start. And they do need more size in there, so probably a power forward like Harrison Barnes will start, and then obviously Fox, but an insanely good young core here with Wembanyama, Stephon Castle, Dylan Harper, and Devin Vassell. Then you got Carter Bryant, who I didn't talk about, and Harrison Ingram and Jeremy Sohan as well. And potentially one of those guys could turn into their starting small forward or power forward moving forward. So that was the list. This took me forever to record. I wonder how long the video is, but I edited it down. So hope you guys enjoyed it. Subscribe to the channel. Watch another video if you guys made it this far, and subscribe to the newsletter. That'll be linked down below, and we'll see you in another one.